Russell Williams joins me. He's on the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. We're obsessed with West Virginia. We've got a lot of candidates from there on. Russell, welcome to TYT Network.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. By the way, is it Russell or Rusty?
Either one. Rusty is what they've called me my whole life, but whenever I'm lobbying and trying to do anything officially, we use Russell.
I got you. All right. I like Rusty better. All right. Cool. So what in the world is the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, and does it still exist?
Well, we passed last year. We passed historic legislation here through the legislature. Most states that have got medical cannabis passed, they've done it through ballot initiative or petition initiative, and we got it done through the legislature. And the legislation that was passed set up an advisory board to basically guide the legislature on how to set the parameters up and keep the medical cannabis program, get it where it needs to be. And as of right now, everything is kind of up in the air. The budget allocated $2 million this session to fund the medical cannabis program, and Governor Justice vetoed a single line item in this year's budget, and that happened to be the funding for the program. So right now, I don't know if you could consider us a medical cannabis state or not.
Yeah, I'm confused by that. I know when we were talking to Paula Jean Swearingen earlier, she's running as Joe Manchin, and she was talking about this. So you had the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Act in 2017. Let me just take it one step at a time. That passed, right?
Yes.
Okay, and it was signed into law, and it is law in West Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and this year, it's still in effect, but the budget for it has been removed basically by the governor. Is that right?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, so without a budget, what happens next?
Well, right now, the board was tasked with, the original bill was one of the most restrictive in the country. They modeled it after Pennsylvania's legislation. It doesn't allow for vertical integration between growers, processors, and dispensaries. It doesn't allow patients to access smoke or vapable flower. It's pretty much a pharmaceutical cannabis program rather than a true medical cannabis program. So they set this board up to, determine whether or not vertical integration should be allowed, to determine whether or not we should allow vaporization or smoke of whole plant material. And we made our recommendations. The board got together, we did the work that we were tasked to do a year early. We weren't supposed to make any of these recommendations until the 2019 legislative session, but we felt that it was important to do now. And the legislature basically ignored every one of our recommendations and kind of did what they wanted to do. And this was a Republican-led effort here in West Virginia, I feel, to stop medical cannabis legislation in its tracks.
Right. The pharmaceutical companies, handing stuff off to them in West Virginia, what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
But all right, so I then wonder why they passed it in the first place. Why pass it and then gut it?
Personally, I think they did it because they know that's the people want it. We have some polling data from 2014 that showed 80% of West Virginia residents believe in medical cannabis and think that it should be legalized. Now, the Republican Party here, they don't feel the same. Actually, as the legislation was getting passed, the chair of the Republican Party put out a letter basically calling medical cannabis patients demons. I think they were playing politics. They're saying, hey, we really, the governor, we believe in this. I believe in medical cannabis, while on the other side, talking out of the other side of their mouth, they're doing everything they can to kill the program. And it's no secret that we are in ground zero for the opioid epidemic here in West Virginia. NPR released an article today detailing the town of Williamson, what happened down there. The town of Williamson has a population of a little less than 3,000 people, and from 2008 to 2015, they were flooded with 20.8 million pain pills in that little town. So the pharmaceutical industry here in West Virginia, just like the extraction industry, has a stranglehold over our legislature, and I believe that's the problem. There's so much money flooding in here that the will of the people is drowned out.
Well, of course, you would say that as one of the demons that the legislator was referring to. We'll get to that in 1 second. But what did you say was the percentage of West Virginians who are in favor of medical marijuana?
The last polling data we saw, it was in the 80% range.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they got to find a way to block that without getting caught and having their fingerprints on it. I get it.
Right.
So now you use medical cannabis, and hence why you're on this board in the first place, because you're not a doctor or an expert in another way. So why in the world did you use it?
Well, in 2012, on Mother's Day, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I was told on that day that without aggressive chemotherapy, I had 4 to 4.5 months to live, and with aggressive chemo, I had a 30% chance of survival. And I had done some research and looked into it and saw that patients in what I refer to as the free states have great success using cannabis to get through chemotherapy. I pretty much made the decision that, legal or not, that's the route I wanted to go down. I didn't buy any of their timelines. I'm pretty much I'm an optimist, and I knew that I would get through this, but I didn't want to come out of aggressive chemotherapy and all of this stuff addicted to pain pills like so many people around here. They found themselves in that position. I feel like most people end up addicted through no fault of their own. Now, of course, we do have some people that choose that lifestyle, but I don't believe that people wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I want to be a junkie." So I knew I was going to get through it, and I didn't want to come out of it addicted. So I made the choice to illegally use cannabis, and that's why I'm able to sit here and do this interview, because it kept me alive.
The marketing of our politicians so often is absolutely upside down. So they told us to say no to drugs like marijuana because they were worried that it was a gateway drug. But come to find out, the reality is you did marijuana to make sure that you avoided the gateway drug. Because opioids are the real gateway drug to the massive problem that you've got in West Virginia of addiction. So that turned out to be the correct decision as we see that epidemic ravage the country. And you made that call back in 2012?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about one other aspect of that. This is not an interview that we normally do on Rebel headquarters. There's a candidate and there's a website and there's donations or volunteers. None of that, right? I'm just getting a sense of what's going on down there. And I was interested in your personal story because at that point you had a pre-existing condition and the Affordable Care Act was not in effect. So what happened there? Did they make you wait to get treatment, and how did you eventually get treatment?
Oh yeah, when I was diagnosed, I was working in a small business. I didn't have any kind of coverage whatsoever, and when they initially found the cancer, they said you need emergency surgery. Well, if you don't have coverage, emergency surgery doesn't hold the same meaning, and I was basically told that until I could pay for it, everything was put on hold. Now, luckily, there's an entity here in West Virginia called the West Virginia Catastrophic Illness Commission, and they are a group of wonderful people, and their only job is to make sure people that find themselves in situations that I was in get covered. Now, this was right when the beginning stages of the Affordable Care Act were being implemented, as far as allowing people to stay on their parents' insurance until 26 and getting rid of the pre-existing conditions. So when the Medicaid expansion here happened, now that did allow me to get my chemo treatments and all of that. But to get the surgery, no, that I had to go through the West Virginia Catastrophic Illness Commission. That process took 6 weeks. And in that 6 weeks time, the cancer spread, and everything got worse.
Man, you are lucky to be alive. And what kind of a barbaric system do we have that doctors say you need emergency surgery to save your life, and then the accountants say no, you need to wait 6 weeks until it gets much worse. By the way, at that point, it becomes far more expensive, and we actually, all of us pay a lot more at the end of the day. But there's a death panel called insurance companies, and that's what you had to go through.
Oh yeah, our for-profit healthcare system. I can't see how anyone could look at the system that we have now and be okay with it. That was the most humiliating experience I've ever been through in my life. I've worked since I was 15 years old. I've tried to do everything the way you're supposed to do it, and the cancer diagnosis. I went from working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in a field that I absolutely loved, to not being able to work at all with a single cancer diagnosis. And the the way I was treated, I wouldn't put my worst enemy through that. There was a specific day that I'll never forget as long as I live. I was told that I had to take paperwork from the Social Security Administration to my doctor. Once my doctor signed off and faxed it back, I was supposed to have my surgery date. They said that they would schedule it and I would know that day. So I did what they asked. I took the paperwork. The paperwork was faxed just like they asked. And, the nurse that was the receptionist at the office, she shut the window. So I knock on the window and open it up, and she's like, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, you would." I was told I would know today when I leave when my surgery was scheduled. And with a very studied nonchalance, she looked at me and she says, "Can you pay for it?" And I said, "What, like with cash?" "No, I can't." And she said, "Honey, until you can pay for it, everything's been put on hold. Have a nice day." And she shut the window. And that was a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, we have got a vicious system here in America. And every day that the corporations control our politicians is a day that we are not going to get the will of the people. Well, whether it's universal coverage so we're not brutal to our own citizens, or it's things like medical cannabis that 80% of the people in your state want. We're not gonna get any of that as long as the corporate donors are in charge.
Absolutely.
So we all got to fight together, brother, on every issue, and specifically on money and politics because it affects everything else. But if you live in West Virginia, put pressure on your legislators. They already passed this bill because you guys told them to. Make sure that they fund it and that you get exactly what you wanted. It's supposed to be a democracy. Join people like Russell Williams in fighting back against this. Rusty, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.